gratitude and fear are two very different ways of relating to a race, right? Like you can go into it with a perspective, I'm so grateful to be here, and you can go into it with a perspective, I'm terrified to be here. What I understand about gratitude is that gratitude is a form of love, and it's a form of love that you can choose. If you are able to be grateful and present, the parts of your brain responsible for fear and pain will likely receive less blood, and so you'll feel less fear and pain.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's episode of the podcast, which, as I'm sure you can tell by the title, is a really deep dive in practical episode on how you can improve your mental performance this year in 2025. There's no person better to do this with me and discuss this subject than the one and only Shannon Thompson, who is a mental performance counselor. I've had Shannon on the podcast numerous times throughout the year. She was one of my first ever podcast guests actually back in 2020. And so it's always been a privilege and joy to welcome her back onto the podcast because she always brings insane wisdom and insights and science behind mindset and mental performance that I would have absolutely no clue about. And I've personally been impacted, not just in my running, but also in my life by her studies, findings, and teachings on this platform. And so today was a really fun way to dive into the subject of mental performance, specifically as it relates to this new year, 2025. And she breaks down the three biggest ways in her mind that you can improve your mental performance this year. This one was a ton of fun, as it always is with Shannon. And if you listen to this conversation all the way through, you are going to walk away with tangible ways in which you can improve your mental performance, which is going to directly, I can promise you, affect not just your running, but also your life. Shannon literally gives out probably thousands of dollars free of information that people would normally pay for in a counselor or a sports psych in this conversation. So you'd be a fool not to listen to thousands of dollars of information for free. And that's what I'm always looking to do. I want this platform to be for you guys and to give you the most value possible. I don't take it for granted that you decide to spend time with me and my guests. And if you do enjoy these conversations, if you are blessed by them, please hit the follow button. Please hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. And also consider giving us a follow and a 5-star review, as well as specifically this episode. Share it with a friend. Share it with someone who you think would find value and benefit from it. That's the easiest way in which this podcast can grow. It's by you sharing it with your circle, inner circle, outer circle, social media, whatever it might be. All those notes aside, I hope you all enjoy this deep dive into the world of mental performance in 3 ways that you can improve in 2025 in that world with the one and only Shannon Thompson. Shannon Thompson, new year means probably like 5-6 episodes with you. This is the first one of the new year. Always a privilege having you on the podcast. I truly mean it. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing well, and I so appreciate you being interested to talk to me so much. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
So you say that I would talk to you every week if I could, if it made sense to, because you always provide, I think, the most value per minute of episode of nearly any of my guests. And I think that's what I'm always looking to do with the platform. Is if a listener is going to, spend 40 minutes with me and my guest, I want to make it as hard hitting and value driven as possible. And I think you do that better than almost anyone I know. So the invites will keep coming. And even to just boil this down to a quick story before we dive into ways the listener can improve their mental performance in 2025. I do a lot of event marketing for Hoka events, as I'm sure you're aware, or my listeners are aware. And I was in Charlotte, and it was like pre-race the day before. And there was a parent, coach, like athletes around. I think it was the parent of an athlete. And the athlete was like, "Oh, you got to meet my dad. He's a big fan of yours." I'm like, "Oh yeah, of course. Would love to meet him." So start talking to the parent, and he starts talking about how he loves the podcast. And he says he's a mindset coach within business. And he said he listens to a lot of the podcasts, but specifically the ones I do with you, and that the learnings that he's taken from these podcasts, he then went and signed up for one of your courses. So he's been on your Zoom sessions and whatnot. And he said that he now models a lot of his present work within the business world off of the things discussed in our conversation. And that to me, Shannon, was like, yep, we got to keep doing these, like, because, and that's so positive, because you think about, the people we impact that we don't even know about. And then that's just one example who I happen to run into, and I wouldn't have known that we would have had that impact had I not run into him. So just one quick story to kick this off of how these conversations impact people and the ripple effect of, the gift of Shannon Thompson and your wisdom.
Oh man, well, thanks so much for sharing that. It's always that's encouraging to hear. Thanks. Yeah, thanks a lot.
First point, and I generally open up our podcast this way, but we constantly have new listeners. So boiling it down, probably for the 10th time I've asked you, 2025, someone's listening to the podcast for the first time. They want to improve in running. They want to make it their year. They know from the title and from the show notes that this episode is going to be about mental performance. And for the first time, maybe they've been a runner for a few years and they focus on, the physical training, but they think, oh, the mental side might be that key that unlocks my next level performance in 2025. Why should runners and people, not just in running, focus on mental performance in 2025?
Man, I would just say your mind, and what I mean by your mind, I mean your perspective on yourself, your perspective on what's ahead of you, your way of seeing, your way of meeting challenges mentally and emotionally, your way of being aware of your focus, your way of being able to control your focus, and all that stuff basically determines any experience you have, like your what you think and what you see, and the stories you tell yourself about what you think and what you see completely change any situations. So it's going to change your experience in every way, depending on the state of your mind and depending on where you put your focus. And with respect to running, there's a strong connection between our mind and our emotions, and our body, and what our body is willing to do for us. So yeah, I'd say our mind is responsible for every element of practically every experience we have in every moment we're alive, and it's so closely tied to our physical body that it also impacts our ability to perform.
Trying to stay on track here. So promise this will be the last question before we dive into your 3 major points that people can improve their mental performance in the new year. How much, and of course it's like very hard to specifically quantify on an individualistic level because we're all different, but how much is someone leaving on the table if they're not doing anything from a thinking about mental performance perspective or working on it, or all they're doing is just like doing the training but nothing else? How much potential do you think people leave on the table? And from your experience of working with athletes, what do those breakthroughs look like when they start to focus on the mental side of things?
Something that a lot of young athletes have that is so precious, and I think we always want them to keep as long as possible, is kind of just like some sort of innocent, fun relationship with their running. Like, I'm just going to go out there and compete and race and play the game of running. Like a lot have that from the beginning, and so with someone like that, I would say I would probably want to educate them as far as how their brain works, kind of what some of the challenges of this sport might be as they progress in it. Because I think it gets harder to maintain that I'm just playing the game of running perspective as they grow. So I think kind of teaching them about themselves, teaching them about the challenges of the sport, teaching them how to manage some focus, and teaching them about their emotions can really protect them from losing that. And then, but there's a whole wide range of relationships with the race, let's say, right? So there's those athletes with I'm having, they can go out there and they can just play the game of running. And then there's other athletes that I've absolutely, maybe they've never experienced that. Maybe racing's always been really scary. Maybe it's always been about trying to make someone proud or something to prove, or the gateway to their future, and it's super stressful and they put all sorts of pressure on themselves, and if those athletes don't focus on it, it'll cost them. I mean, how much is on the table? Everything's on the table. Everything's on the table. So it depends on the person.
So I texted you with this idea that we've done all these podcasts, and I really wanted to. January is a cool month where you kind of can set the direction for the year, not just from your life perspective, but as I think about the podcast, set the direction for the podcast. And obviously, as you mentioned there, mental performance, such a key component of a successful running career, successful life. So I wanted to dedicate an episode to it. But specifically, I've liked doing these episodes more recently where it's just like maybe shorter, but more practical and to the point and like formulaic in a way. And so I asked you, I was like, can you come up with like three points of ways in which people can improve mental performance? And hopefully through this, speaking to the listener here, you can improve your running through this way. But also, my hope would be that these things impact you to the point of sharing it with a friend, and we can have that impact on not just you, but your community and state and country as a whole.
Yeah.
It's always funny seeing the countries that listen to this podcast. I'm like, so only think the US. And then I'm like, didn't know that country existed that I just read by listening
That's
to the
great.
podcast.
That's so
So with
great.
that being said, point one, how can someone improve their mental performance in 2025? What's your first thing on the docket?
Yeah, I'll give a little preface. I'll give a little preface to that. So I definitely can see the value of wanting to get like straight to the point and keep things simple, you know, and I so I've got a few of those things, and I'll share kind of the quick things to start with, and then I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
get into something that's not quite so quick.
Let's do
Um,
it.
yeah, I think that what happens, you know, when any of us see a heading that's like, what are 3 things I can do to better my track season this year, or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
a presumption that arises inside of us is like, oh, great, there's a quick way to make a big change. You know, like let's read about these quick ways that can make a big change. You know, there's a few things that I can do to make sure that this season goes well for me, or maybe I won't hurt so much, or maybe I can be positive all the time. You know, like there's sort of an expectation or a hope that exists. Um, and there are a few quick things that you can do, and I'll share them or you're going to wonder. So I'll share them briefly and then I'll get into what I really want to talk about.
Okay.
So I think quick things that'll make the biggest difference to somebody. I'd say expand your awareness to the people around you, like your teammates, your competitors, your coaches, and just enjoy them. You know, enjoy the opportunity, the privilege, the chapter in your life that you get to spend doing this passion of yours alongside them. If you can broaden your attention to that, that'll help for sure. I'd say commit to your plan of execution, make that your focus inside the race, and actually commit to it and actually follow it. That will make another huge difference to how a person performs, and I think the experience they have inside the race. And then I think the other one is choose a perspective of curiosity toward your outcomes, as opposed to like need or attachment for outcomes. If there's like 3 small things and things that bring a lot of power briefly, if you just bring them to mind, I'd say those 3 things would probably go the furthest. But I want to talk about different things. I want to talk about different things because you were kind and you said to me that I bring value, which is so kind of you. And so I want to share some things I think have more lasting value even than me just sharing those little tidbitty things to go and experiment with. And I guess I just want to start your listeners down a journey of a path down a path that could be a path of genuine change, but is not like quick fixes. And it kind of means meeting some old deep human realities inside of yourself about what it's like to be a vulnerable human being faced with big goals that matter to you, you know, in an unknown future. And that is to start out, like if you want to know my first point for today, what it really is consider how you want to relate to the race this season. And I know that's absolutely going to need some explaining. I actually can't remember if I have talked a lot about relationship with the race. I think I did at some point
A
on
little
our
bit, yeah.
yeah, on our podcast. But you've always got new listeners, and I'll do it again. You know, I'll share again what I mean by that. So so relationship with the race, and feel free, by the way, to expand relationship with the race to your relationship with running as a whole. I think it's smart too. It's hard to talk in that broad of a context. You know, I find it easier to explain what I'm talking about here in relationship to racing, and then just invite you to broaden it and expand it to running as a whole. But basically, relationship with the race is the story you're telling, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, about what is the nature of this opportunity, what's the nature of this challenge, what's the nature of this environment, and what does it mean to me. You know, how does it influence my future? Maybe might be one way of asking what does it mean to me, and also what it means about you. So how much power does it have to reveal who you are, determine who you are, kind of like what's at stake. Now, I still think, you know, even with that explanation, understanding that's still not as clear as we could be about understanding relationship with the race. And one way that I try to help athletes understand what I mean by relationship with the race is kind of consider consider how you relate to a race or how you feel about going to a race in a similar way as to considering how you relate or feel about spending time with a certain kind of person. So some of us, well, actually, all of us, I think, can relate to the experience of having certain people in your life that when you know you're going to go spend time with them, you're just excited about that. You're like, I'm going to go hang out with my friend Steve on Saturday. I'm already pumped about Saturday. I'm already pumped I get to spend time with him. And then when you go there and you spend time with him, the best version of yourself is going to come out. There's just something about how you see Steve and the nature of Steve and what he means to you and who you become in that space that brings out the best in you, right? So that's a relationship. That's one form of relationship. And then I think we also can relate to the experience of having someone in our life where we don't feel quite as excited to go and spend time with them. Because okay, I'm going to go spend time with Aunt
To the
Dharma.
one uncle at Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
That's
to
the
the one
example everyone
uncle. Okay, like
uses.
yeah, I'm going to a family gathering. Oh, uncle's gonna be there, and you're already like, oh God, it's only that's on Saturday. So don't have to think about it. It's only 5 days. It's still 5 days away, and it's only an hour. And when you get there and you're with uncle, you're kind of involuntarily closed. You don't know what to say. You can't share the things that mean the most to you. You're not your best self. In fact, you could try to be and you almost couldn't, because that relationship's
Mm.
not the same. And I think athletes relate to races in like almost exactly the same way. Like I know athletes that I talk with who are so excited about their first track meet on Friday or their first track meet on Saturday. And I know other athletes who are scared to death and totally dreading their first track meet on Friday or their first track meet on Saturday, So that's what I mean by relationship with the race is kind of yeah, like what do you see the nature of it as being? What does it mean for you? What does it mean about you? What kind of emotions and states does like naturally come out of you when you think you're going to be interacting with the race? um and so yeah, I think one of the steps the first step to take is just probably notice right now what your relationship with the race is like. Be as honest as you can about what your relationship with the race is like, and then consider what you would like it to be. How you would like it to be. And in a second, I'll explain a little bit about what you would like it to. Some examples of maybe what would be some optimal relationships with the race or ideal ways for it to be. But I feel like I've been talking a lot there for a second. You might have a question
That's
or a
good.
thought.
Yeah, I guess honestly, something that could lead into that was my only follow up question from point one. And if you want to answer this and then go into point two or just weave them however you feel called to do so, go for it, run with it. But in the history of our conversations, one of the most impactful, biggest takeaways for me was your description of how you can't feel gratitude and fear at the same time. I think it
Mm.
was something along those lines. Can you elaborate on that concept of, oh gosh, there was like a very scientific takeaway because I remember turning it into an Instagram reel and it like blew up about basically, yeah, just like
Oh.
viewing things from the perspective of gratitude and excitement rather than from of a place of fear and like the differences of your body when you view those two different things. And if there's nothing scientific there, just your general thoughts, because obviously I know you're going to agree with it's better to approach a race from gratitude than fear.
Yeah, well, that's a great like prompting because gratitude and fear are two very different ways of relating to a race, right? Like you can go into it with a perspective, I'm so grateful to be here, and you can go into it with a perspective, I'm terrified to be here.
Hmm.
And what I understand about gratitude is that gratitude is a form of love, and it's a form of love that you can choose. We can't always feel love on demand, right? We want to. We probably so often we want to, even Uncle at Thanksgiving, but we can't. But we can usually find something to be sincerely grateful for, and actively cultivate gratitude for that thing. And when we feel love, the parts of our brain that are responsible for pain and fear are actually inhibited. Um, and the same would be said for when we're extremely present. So, like one relationship with a race someone could choose to develop is I'm gonna like the way I'm going to relate to this race is I'm going to be grateful and I'm going to be present. And if you are able to be grateful and present, the parts of your brain responsible for fear and pain will likely receive less blood. And so you'll feel less fear and pain. I think that's probably what you were remembering would be that
I think
relationship.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Lead us into point 2 here.
Okay. I want to share one more thing. And
Okay.
let me know, I want to share one more thing that I just from conversations with athletes, that I think this might be of value to people. I think I want to share kind of 2 different relationships with the race. And probably the most common default relationship to a race that I hear from athletes is there's a deep belief that how they perform really matters significantly to their long-term future, and kind of like a deep awareness of that, and sometimes a deep fear about that. And often for many young athletes, there's a deep belief and fear that every workout or race proves or disproves whether or not that future is possible, which is an enormous amount of weight to put on a workout or a race, and there's also often a deep level of belief that I have to keep this level of intensity and focus on my goals, or else they're going to slip out of my hands. And I think this is the default. This is one of the most common, not always totally conscious, but if we dig even just a little bit, the athletes will be like, "Oh yeah, that's there for me." So that's one of the most normal things. And I think it's natural. And I think if an athlete doesn't get help on working on their optimal perspective toward a race, that this happens kind of automatically and accidentally. And this relationship with the race usually leads to a whole lot of pressure, whole lot of nerves, whole lot of fear, whole lot of I have to perspectives on the race. And it makes the athlete more vulnerable inside the race and more likely to blow up or more likely to give up if something goes wrong. So if there's any change, I usually try to help an athlete make from that. And usually athletes need help with that. It's not I think it's not a natural thing, normal thing for them to make this change on their own. Because I try to help them develop a relationship with the race around something like the racing space is an opportunity to discover and shape who I am. And this race is just one of many in my career, and no one can ever determine my future. And that's a truth, especially if you're 17 years old. We are so far from ever being able to determine what your long-term future is. I talked to somebody last night and we did the math, and he was 16, and I was like, you probably have 10 years. You probably have 10 years before you can start to draw conclusions about your absolute long-term ultimate capacities in your running, if you're willing to go the longer distances. So it's just not a thing right now. So yeah, any relationship with the race that can expand an athlete's perspective on their one race to being like, oh man, this is just one race of many. No one race can determine who I am, no matter how poor or no matter how bad. And if they can expand their relationship to I'm going to use this race to re-experience what racing indoors is like, notice what arises for me inside the race, to see where my fitness is at right now, to be curious about that. If they can bring a little more of a present, curious, open, almost work person-like attitude towards any one race they have, especially races early in the season. Use it as an information gathering mission about you and your fitness and what's coming up for you right now. Honestly, I think that kind of a relationship with the race is gonna serve them the best. And I honestly think they'll perform better that way. Intuitively, that sounds counterintuitive to the ones that are so used to the intensity and so used to the I have to, and this matters, and I have to make this matters and make this matter so much in order to perform well. I would just encourage anyone to try it. Try just being all right, it's just one race on the path. Let's be curious. Let's use this as an information gathering mission about myself, and I'll, refine my plan and my approach next time. Something like that. Yeah.
So good. If I'm not mistaken, points 2 and 3 kind of tie into point 1. Point 1 kind of sets everything up here. But if I'm not mistaken, point 2 was in regards to obstacles. So can you elaborate on this concept?
Yeah, totally. So obstacles, I think the first step to handling obstacles is to accept that they're going to be there. I think a lot of times we go into.
Wait, Shannon, you're saying my race isn't going to go picture perfect plan. Every split's going to be right on. The weather's going to be perfect.
Well,
Not going to get tripped up.
I think one of the, again, I don't know that this is always super conscious. I think we kind of mind wander our way into this way of thinking, but I think one of the most mistaken kind of fear stories or worries or topics that athletes lose their mind down is, how is my body going to feel on the day? How am I going to feel inside the race? And then how is that going to impact my race? Or what if that fear that I experienced last track season or in cross country, 2/3 of the way through the race, and I can't keep this pace to the end, comes up and I fall off the pace, like we get worried our body's going to feel a certain way. We get worried that our emotions are going to fluctuate in a certain way that compromises what we want to happen, inside the race, which is then going to compromise our outcome, is what we figure. Those things are going to happen. Like, they're definitely going to happen. Like, I think if we go in and be like those things are definitely going to happen, and in that you're going to have days when you don't feel the way you want to feel. And I think when an athlete really starts to master themselves and become a more consistent athlete, they realize that on the days when they're probably going to run the best they're actually going to, the best they're actually capable of, they feel bad earlier than they want to. And then they learn what a mature athlete learns over time is they learn, like, oh man, I feel worse than I want to, this 2K into a 5K, but they commit and they stay present, and they're like, oh, but that doesn't matter. I'm able to maintain this pace to the end. Like, it was really hard. It was really scary for me, but I can. And oh, geez, shoot. That's how it actually feels when I'm about to run my best, is that it's hurting more than I wanted to 2K into a 5K, So I think one of my best tips about obstacles is expect the obstacles. Expect them. Don't go in hoping they don't show up. Be like, oh, today could be a day when my body doesn't feel good. That's part and parcel of the challenge. Today could be a day when I really struggle to be present. I really struggle to be positive. It could be a day when fear shows up in the middle of the race, or the desire to give up shows up. These are all they're inherent part of the challenges. They're not obstacles to the challenge. They are the challenge. So if you, what I would recommend any athlete to do is think about, like, what has shown up for me in the past that has got in the way of me being my best. Maybe it's how my body feels. Maybe it's how some emotional reactions I have before the race or inside the race. Expect those to show up and be like, all right, let's relabel them as inherent parts of the challenge, and be ready to meet them, and ideally prepare a plan to meet them, and this, one of the things I mentioned super briefly in the early part of our conversation is, like, rely on your race execution, like focus on your race execution and actually do it, include those obstacles in your race execution, like make that plan around those things showing up. Like, what are you going to do when those things show up? And then be ready to not want to do the thing. Like, be ready, like when you get in the race and that emotion shows up and you're like, oh, I planned for this, and inside the race is a whole lot different than outside the race. Like, planning to make the brave move inside the race is a whole lot different than telling yourself you're going to make the brave move when you're outside the race. And be ready for that to be hard, be ready to not want to do it, and try to, like, commit to doing it.
My thought there, piggybacking off of that, and you might disagree with this quote. If so, please let me know, because you are way more wise in the world of the mental world. But the quote is, you don't become confident by shouting affirmations in the mirror, but rather by having a stack of undeniable proof that you are who you say you are. Outwork your self-doubt. And how that relates to what you were talking about in my head was, you have to build up evidence that you're the type of person that you want to be. And so if you are someone who naturally is fearful of races, figure out how you can practice that and tackle that fear in workouts. And then once you successfully do that, you can then draw from that experience going into the race of, I did this on Wednesday. Or if you struggle to close the last 200 meters of a race, do that. Maybe this is a good coaching tactic. If you're a coach, like 200-meter rep to close out workout, and you're mentally thinking, it's not just physically running the rep fast. You're mentally thinking, I'm practicing the muscle of being someone who closes races fast. And then when
Yes.
it gets the race on Saturday, you can say, oh, I already did it in practice. Because I think in my experience, a lot of times that I've fallen short in races in terms of overcoming obstacles, it's quite frankly because I wasn't prepared and I didn't have that stack of undeniable proof that I was who I wanted to be or was who I said I was. So I guess maybe a question here, or just any general thoughts on that, slash how can people work on from a day-to-day perspective of like tackling these obstacles so that when the race comes, they can be properly, adequately handled to do it. Also, just important note here, if you're a high schooler, like high school cross country, I raced 10 weeks in a row. There were probably 3 of those that were really important. Use the other 7 to practice. It doesn't even have to be
Totally.
workouts. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up practice. Cause yeah, I think one of the most derailing, a couple of the most derailing things that can make athletes fear races, that can impact their relationship with the race and also can impact their ability to perform the way they want to, is like how their body feels and what's going on for them emotionally inside the race. And that's stuff that happens in practice too, right? Like you come to a practice and you're not totally recovered from whatever you did before, or who knows, you're not feeling it for whatever day, for whatever reason. Or maybe you're stressed from something going on in your social life, or maybe you're upset because of something that went on in class. These are days where you have such an opportunity to practice working with probably a couple of the primary things that are going to derail you in a race. So sometimes an athlete will come to a practice and they'll be like, shoot, I feel so tired today, like this is a problem and this is a bad thing. Or shoot, I'm totally distracted today, or I'm super upset about this thing that happened in my life. Or I just don't feel like I can, like I'm not confident about this workout today. We can meet this as a really positive opportunity, because then you can practice meeting those hard things, like your body feeling the way that it feels and your emotions feeling the way that they feel in practice, as opposed to, yeah, you can meet those things in practice basically. And then that gives you, like you said, confidence. I like that you also brought up confidence. There's a psychologist called Phil Stutz. There's a Netflix documentary about him right now. I enjoyed it this past winter. And he says that confidence is actually the top. Like if there's a pyramid, confidence is at the top of the pyramid. And he says the bottom of the pyramid, like what the confidence is built on, is faith, actually. Like, and what faith is like, man, I'm going to take a leap of faith that I can actually hold this pace. I'm going to take a leap of faith that, this is where I would usually fall off. Well, this is where I'm going to stay on. Or I'm going to take a leap of faith that maybe this competitive move that I'm usually too scared to make might work. So confidence actually starts with faith, and then the middle part is action. So you start with faith, you move to action, and then like the result is the confidence, which is just another way of saying like what you just said. But I liked it. I liked how he
Love the
framed it.
pyramid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I liked how he framed it like that, because so often athletes think, oh, I just need to be confident to hold the pace, or I need to be confident if I'm going to make that move. And no, like you said, you earn your confidence, and you earn your confidence by, I think, noticing days when you feel crummy in practice physically and emotionally, and you still commit to doing the best you can with the workout. And I think this is where plan of execution comes in too. Like if you have a plan of execution and you feel crummy, literally that plan of execution becomes like guidelines for you. When you're feeling crummy, you're not usually in the state to make the most wise, best decisions. If you have a plan of execution, they've already been made for you. So you just lean on those, you hang on to those. And you can do that in practice, and you can do that in a race too. And the more often you do it, the more confidence you develop, and the more reliable a person you become. You start to trust yourself.
We covered, how do you want to relate to the race? We covered obstacles. Take us away with the final point here of how people can improve their mental performance in 2025.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about that this morning, and I think what I'm going to do is like reiterate a little bit what I already said. I'll tell you like a short little story to illustrate this. So this past week, I went to a retreat, and at the retreat, there was musicians that were playing music through the retreat involved staying up really late. And there was these musicians that would play music from like 9 p.m. to like 2 a.m. So that's like it's a very long time to be playing live music, you know? And they did it 3 nights in a row. And I would say like late on that last night, I noticed one of the musicians who had yet to rest. He'd been going all night long. I noticed him offer his guitar to one of his colleagues that hadn't been taking part in these like super long night performances. And he basically was asking him if he could play. And I felt like I was watching him. I was like, man, he looks so tired. Like this guy hasn't stopped for 3 nights and he's been playing beautifully for 3 nights. And, but his colleague was like, no, thanks, man. I can't, like, I'm too tired. Like I'm too tired. I don't want to play. And I like watched that go down. I was like, damn. And this musician, he just like took a breath and he just started to play, and he started to play this like beautiful haunting hymn with so much sincerity and like so much heart. And I got the sense that he was just gathering like everything up in him that was left and projecting it through himself into this like effort. He like, I don't even know, like he can't have been feeling good. You know, he didn't want to play anymore. He was hoping his friend was going to play, but he was like, "Oh, friend's not going to play. Well, I'm going to play, and I'm going to play with my whole heart." And he took whatever he had left, which for sure he wasn't feeling the best, you know, and he played this gorgeous hymn. And to me, you know, this parallels a decision often made in running. You know, it parallels a decision that's made going to practice. It parallels a decision made in workouts. It parallels a decision made inside of races. You know, over and over, we're presented with opportunities to give our best. And sometimes it's a mountain on a clear day, you know, and sometimes we're thick in weather. But I think the most moving and inspiring and liberating and self-respect earning decisions we make are the ones that we give through weather. And I literally sat there and I watched him and I was like, ooh, I need to learn from him. Like, he just didn't hesitate. He just gave his best through his weather. And that's what, like, the third thing is we got to learn to do that. And runners got to learn to do that. Don't even hesitate. Like, oh shoot, I'm not feeling the way I want to feel. What's my race plan? I got to do that. I got to do that. And sometimes it's going to work out and sometimes it's not going to work out. But, you know, like I use the metaphor of weather a lot. And I think when you give your best anyway, despite not feeling how you want to feel or not being in the emotional state that you prefer, and especially when you do it, even when the desired outcome is already lost. You know, I think one of the times people give up the most is they're seeing their splits or whatever, and they're like, I'm not going to get my goal. So especially then, I use that metaphor of weather. I think that when a human being makes that choice, like that's the equivalent to like sun cast through storm clouds, you know, or that's the equivalent of like the rain on the desert or the lightning and the thunderstorm, like the things you like stop your car to watch because it's so beautiful and it's so special. So, you know, and so I just want to encourage athletes to be eager, ready, waiting for the moment when they feel terrible physically or emotionally, and they can choose just to give their best to it, and look for those opportunities and do it over and over. And yeah, I don't know how to finish other than that.
Yeah, well, let me give you a thought, and we can close it off of this. So I coach one athlete, and he definitely will listen to this podcast because he's the most loyal listener. He listens to like every single episode. So shout out Ethan K for listening. I hope you're enjoying your run while you're listening to this. So I coach him. I coached him for a crazy story, but I won't get into it on the podcast. But very new to running, played tennis and soccer in high school, and then he goes to Ohio State. He started, running kind of casually and has gotten more serious about it. Ran his first marathon this past fall, the Columbus Marathon, and his goal was sub 2:45. So I started coaching him, helping him write training, and he was just blowing workouts out of the water. I was like, I think we need to adjust, So then the goal became 2:39, and I ran with him the day before the race. And what I told him was a race is a celebration of all the hard work, and whether or not, sure, the 5K, the 10K, NCAA cross, like it's unpredictable, but marathons are truly the most unpredictable thing in the sport because so much can go wrong. Like truly out of any activity in running, in my opinion, marathon's the most unpredictable. And I said, you know, whether or not you run 2:39 tomorrow, you're in 2:39 shape. I can confidently say that. And that's enough to be proud of and like to
Yeah.
celebrate. And if you don't get it tomorrow, I have no doubt you'll get back in this fitness. And regardless, and here's kind of what I thought of when you were talking there, like run 2:39 effort. And tomorrow that might be 2:43 or it might be 2:35. And he ended up running 2:34, by the way. Crazy. First
Wow.
marathon.
Good job, coach.
Yeah. So, but like but I think that mindset of, you know, maybe the next day he felt the worst he's ever felt before, still give me a 2:39 effort, like in your mind. So to an athlete out there, like one, be proud of all the training you've put in. This is why we race, right? It's the nice little thumbs up there. Sure, what's going on. It's the celebration of like all the hard work. As I said, I truly think it is like the race is the fun part. And then also just like, yeah, give it your best on the day, which is like such the cliche saying, but it's so true. Like walk away with a result you're proud of and give your best on the day, given how you felt, because you're not going to feel great every race. And if you did, running wouldn't be fun. If you knew every time you were going to line up, it was going to go picture perfect, I bet not as many people would run. And that's what makes special races special. The fact that magic happens every couple of times a year. And if you can catch it like once a year, it's like, boom, magic.
It's so true. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Man, good for you. I like that. I like that run 2:39 effort. And that's a cool way you phrased it too. Like I know you're in 2:39 shape, don't know what this race is going to be, give 2:39 effort and one of these days it'll show up for you. I think that was really well said. I think that probably freed him up a lot.
Only final question for you as we wrap up this conversation. So many people listen, like I experience this. I listen to so many podcasts, yet I rarely do what they say in the podcast. I listen to David Goggins and he's such an inspiration, but I allow this almost like false sense of motivation where I'm like inspired when I'm hearing it, but it doesn't tangibly change my life. My fear with things like this is someone could have gotten 40 minutes into this podcast with us. I mean, you just gave them hundreds of dollars worth, if not thousands of dollars worth of information for free. Like you truly carved a path where people can get better and follow these practices to get better. The information's out there. What stands between someone listening, where they're at and where they want to be is the action, kind of like you talked about with the pyramid. Mm-hmm. What does it take for someone to take action? And I know you're not like a behavioral psychologist, but for someone listening, like what's it going to take for someone to not just listen to this podcast, close it out, forget about it, but to actually like take that step? And what's like one practical challenge for the listener to get that momentum cycle of behavior and habit to really start working on mental performance in 2025? Anyone can listen, very few do it.
You know what I think truly makes people take action is suffering performances and experiences that are not aligned with what they want their running to be, you know? And I think the suffering of those is what really makes people take action. And what that action usually looks like is they're just like, man, I don't want another experience like last time. I don't want to give up in the race again. I don't want to do the thing I always do. It hurts, and I spend time miserable between races when I do that. And then almost out of desperation and being at the end of their rope, they take some leap of faith they didn't know they could, and they take that leap of faith within a moment that's really hard. And then they discover, whoa, I got a whole lot more in me than I thought I did. Or, whoa, if I do just focus on my plan and break up the race and focus on one chunk at a time, it works, Like, I would just encourage someone. There's nothing I can do to make someone take action. They have to choose it. They have to choose it. But I think what I would say is choose it before you've suffered so much that you have no other choice, like save yourself that, like if you're like, man, I know there's moments inside of a race when I could take a chance, but I'm scared. Or I know there's a moment inside of a race when I just feel like can't go faster, or I drop off the pack, so I'm sure I can't, I'm sure I can't keep it. But what if I blow up at the end of the race? Let's test it out and see if you do. Um, so yeah, I guess what I'm hoping is by sharing that suffering is usually the thing that changes people. I hope there's some people listening who are like, oh, I'm going to make the change before I have to,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's what I'm hoping by sharing that.
And that's
But
also to the listener.
yeah,
You can accelerate your. I mean, people are just competitive by nature, which I know you and I know could be another podcast with you in the future. How you view competition. We've talked about it before, but like people are so competitive, and I think even me saying most people listening to this right now won't take action on these things, and how type A runners think is that's not going to be me. Let me get ahead of the pack. Let me do it. Let me do the work.
I'll tell you I'll say a couple things. One kind of anecdotal thing I've noticed about the professional runners I work with in comparison to all the other runners I work with is when I suggest that they try something, they do it. And they do it completely, and they do it completely thoroughly. That's not the case a lot of the time with other athletes that I work with. It's something that truly sets them apart. And I don't know if that's something they've learned to do or if it's in their personality to do it, but they make the change right away. And they experiment with things, and sometimes the change isn't right for them, but they don't just stay the same. Yeah. And one thing I should have mentioned too, you asked me, how do you make people make change? And I'm like, sometimes you need, this is my job. I should definitely share this one. Sometimes you need help, like sometimes you need help. You're like, man, I've tried to change my perspective on a race. I've tried to hold a pace, and something overwhelms me and I just can't. Like my job is to help people make those changes. So I should say that too. but
Where can people connect with you? This is a good.
Yeah.
What's your email? Website?
Yeah, my email. Yep. Well, my email is shannon@hypo2sport.com. And my website is shannonthompsonmpc.com. Yeah, those are probably the two best ways. I'm on Instagram. I don't know. I'm not super active on that from a educational perspective. I kind of just share most
from
of
time
my
to time. I can say as a loyal follower, from time to time, you'll be
time to
blessed.
time. I use it more as a way to indulge like beautiful photos and thoughts that matter to me, but
People
yeah.
can still reach you there. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Shannon, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for giving the people what they want, which is practical wisdom and advice from someone who knows the subject so intimately well on how to improve and get better at life and running and all that fun stuff. That's what we're on earth to do. So appreciate this conversation and you as always being such a blessing to this community, and excited to see the stories. Hopefully I don't have to wait until Charlotte for someone to reach out, but to see the ways that this podcast blesses people. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. One thing I should mention, Dom, that I just remembered is you asked like, how do you help people make changes? I should mention that question asking thing that I'm adding to my website.
Yes. You want to add it real quick?
Yeah, let's add it. Let's add it if that's all right.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So one thing I want to share with people listening is pretty soon, definitely by the time this podcast comes out, I'm going to be offering basically a question answering portal. And that's where people are welcome to email me questions about the mental side of running, and I will answer those questions on my website. So yeah, anybody who has a question that you want answered, feel free to email me. I'm sure I'll set something up on social media to do with this at some point, but I think I'll start out with just having it by email and then posting the answers to the questions on my website. But yeah, feel free to email me questions that you would like to have answered. I'm going to try to answer about one a week. And I know I will sometimes outsource those questions to some of the really good runners that I'm lucky to know, because some of them will have great advice and great stories to share with the athletes who have questions. So yeah, please reach out with your questions.
Amazing. Shannon, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.